Hello everybody, Richard Freeman again. I want to dedicate this piece to my wife, Heidi Freeman. She is the person that has supported me the most. We went on our first date on Valentine's Day back in high school. After that date, I didn't think she would want anything to do with me, to be honest with you. To my surprise, went on a couple dates after that before we went our separate ways. I went in the military, and I went in the military, she went to college. It was about 6 years before we had any contact with each other again. I was in Iraq, and she wrote me a letter. I did not realize it at the time, but I guess I asked her out on a date in my first letter back to her. We continued to write back and forth for about 4 or 5 months. When I returned to Georgia, she came down from Indiana to spend some time with me. A little over a year later, in October 2004, we got married and went on a honeymoon. The day we got back from our honeymoon, my dad told me that a sergeant had called and I had a report date in November to go to Iraq again. So less than a month after we got married, I was on my way back to Iraq. While I was training, I called Heidi, and she told me that I was to be a father. I was so happy I had to tell everybody. I worked it out with my chain of command, my bosses, and eventually made it back to Indiana for the birth of our first child. Throughout the whole time I was gone, she was miserable without a doubt, being pregnant and me being gone. But every week she'd send me a box of goodies for myself and the guys that I was with. While I was in Iraq that time, it came time for me to decide whether I was going to get out of the military or stay in. I didn't know which one I wanted to do. She wanted me out for sure. But instead of saying no, what she said was, "You was in the military before you was with me, so I'll support you either way." After that, she said, "If you do re-enlist, then I'm going to push you to retire from it." I agreed and did re-enlist. After I returned from Iraq, we had our problems, as do most families after a deployment. We took it slow and worked together and got through the rough times. Since that deployment, I have changed jobs in the military, where I was gone for about 3 months. With her 1-year-old and being pregnant with her second child, Heidi would drive every other weekend 6 to 8 hours just to spend 2 days with me. After I returned from my training, our second child was born. About 3 months after that, we received notice that I was going to be deployed to Iraq for the 3rd time. Of course, this just tore Heidi up inside. Some nights she did let it show, but for the most part she did well in hiding it. I did end up deploying, and about halfway through it I came home for 2 weeks. We decided not to tell anybody that I was coming home and have a birthday party for one of my daughters. This way Heidi could invite everybody over, surprise them by me being home. The fact that Heidi knew I was coming and didn't tell anybody, and when I say anybody, this is to include our daughters, is probably the hardest part of the deployment for Heidi. I have obviously returned from Iraq and we're doing fine. If it had not been for the love and support of Heidi, I'd be miserable. She has been and will continue to be the drive that keeps me going.